Inside a cold, sterile chamber deep within the maximum security wings of Greystone Penitentiary, a man sat motionless on the edge of a metal-framed bed. His name was Marcus Bennett, and in 12 hours he would be dead. The fluorescent lights above him hummed with a low, persistent buzz that seemed to drill into his skull. His prison-issued orange jumpsuit hung loosely on his frame, a testament to the weight he had lost over years of incarceration. His hands trembled slightly as they clasped together, knuckles white with tension. But here is what no one expected. When the warden approached him that morning, clipboard in hand, and asked Marcus if he had any final requests before his execution, Marcus did not ask for a lavish meal. He did not request to see a lawyer. He did not beg for clemency or demand to speak with a priest. Instead, Marcus lifted his hollow eyes and made a request that left every officer in that corridor speechless. He asked to see his dog. Not just any dog. His former K-9 partner, a German shepherd named Titan, the only creature in this world who had ever truly understood him. The officers thought it was strange, perhaps even pathetic. Some laughed quietly among themselves. Others shook their heads in disbelief. But when Titan finally walked into that execution wing, when his paws clicked against the cold concrete floor and his eyes met Marcus's for the first time in 5 years, something happened that no one could have predicted. Titan did not run to Marcus with joy. He did not whimper with recognition. Instead, the retired police dog froze, his body rigid with tension, and began to growl. The guards exchanged nervous glances. The warden stepped back instinctively. And Marcus, the man who had once been a decorated hero, felt his heart shatter all over again. But Titan was not growling at Marcus because he hated him. He was growling because he remembered something that had been buried for 5 long years, something that was about to blow the lid off the greatest injustice the state had ever seen. Before we go deeper into this story, take a second and hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. The facility stirred to life long before the first light of dawn crept over the horizon. Execution days at Greystone Penitentiary carried a weight that pressed down on everyone within its walls, from the guards who walked the corridors to the inmates who lay silent in their cells, counting the hours until it was all over. The air itself felt different on mornings like these. Heavier, more oppressive. Even the most hardened correctional officers, men who had witnessed unspeakable violence and cruelty over decades of service, moved with a certain reluctance. Their boots struck the concrete floors with measured steps, as though each footfall was a countdown to something final. At the far end of the death row corridor, in cell block 7, Marcus Bennett sat in perfect stillness. Once upon a time, his name had been spoken with reverence in police precincts across the state of Georgia. For 14 years, Officer Marcus Bennett and his K-9 partner Titan had been an unstoppable force. Together, they had tracked down fugitives hiding in dense forests, located children who had wandered away from their families, and uncovered drug caches that other units had missed entirely. Their bond had been legendary. Titan, with his sharp intelligence and unwavering loyalty, seemed to read Marcus's mind before he even gave commands. And Marcus, in turn, had dedicated his life to caring for the German shepherd who had saved him more times than he could count. But that was a lifetime ago. Now, Marcus was nothing more than inmate number 847291, a condemned man in an orange jumpsuit, waiting for the final chapter of his life to close. 2 guards stood outside his cell, watching him through the bars. One of them, a younger man named Davidson, shifted uncomfortably on his feet. "Never seen one so calm before his execution," he muttered to his partner, keeping his voice low. "Most of them are crying by now. praying, screaming, something. The older guard, a weathered man named Patterson, who had worked death row for 23 years, simply nodded. "Sometimes the calm ones are the scariest," he replied. "Sometimes it means they've already made peace with what they did." But Patterson was wrong about that. Marcus was not calm because he had made peace with anything. He was calm because somewhere deep within the shattered remains of his heart, a tiny flame of hope still flickered. Titan was coming. And if there was anyone in this world who could reveal the truth about what really happened that night 5 years ago, it was the German shepherd who had been there to witness everything. Marcus closed his eyes and let his mind drift backward through time, to the days when he still wore a badge, when Titan was still by his side, when the world had not yet crumbled beneath his feet. Before Marcus Bennett became a condemned prisoner, he had been one of the finest K-9 handlers the Ridgemont Police Department had ever seen. His rise through the ranks had been nothing short of remarkable, but it was his partnership with Titan that truly cemented his legacy. Marcus first met Titan at a rehabilitation facility for rescued animals on the outskirts of Savannah, Georgia. The German shepherd had been found wandering the streets, malnourished and terrified, bearing the scars of years of abuse from a backyard breeding operation. Most handlers took one look at the trembling dog and walked away, convinced he would never have what it took to become a police K-9. But Marcus saw something different. Beneath the fear and the trauma, he recognized a spark of intelligence, a willingness to trust despite everything the world had done to break him. And so Marcus took Titan home, not as a project or an assignment, but as a partner. Every morning before sunrise, Marcus trained Titan in his backyard, speaking softly, moving gently, building trust one moment at a time. He never raised his voice, never used force. Instead, he praised every small victory. Within 6 months, the fearful dog had transformed into something extraordinary. Titan became the top performer in the K-9 Academy, outpacing dogs bred specifically for police work. His tracking ability was unmatched, his instincts razor-sharp, his loyalty absolute, and somewhere along the way, they became family. Marcus lived alone with no wife, no children, no close family. But Titan filled every empty space in his life. They ate together, trained together, slept in the same room. When Marcus suffered nightmares after violent cases, Titan would press his warm body against him, grounding him. And when Titan developed a limp after a dangerous chase across a construction site, Marcus slept on the floor beside him for an entire week, refusing to leave his partner's side until he had fully recovered. Their bond was tested countless times on the job, but one night stood out above all others. They had been pursuing a suspect through an abandoned textile factory in Ridgemont's industrial district. The building was a maze of rusted machinery and collapsed beams, shadows pooling everywhere. Marcus moved through the darkness carefully, flashlight sweeping across the debris. Titan padded silently beside him, every muscle coiled with tension. They had done this 100 times before. They knew how to work together without speaking. But this time was different. Without warning, Titan stopped dead in his tracks, blocking Marcus's path. The German shepherd's ears flattened against his skull, and a low growl rumbled from deep within his chest. Marcus froze. He had learned to trust Titan's instincts completely. If Titan sensed danger, then danger was there. A split second later, a figure dropped from the rafters, knife gleaming. Marcus barely had time to react before Titan launched himself at the attacker with a ferocious roar. The dog's jaws clamped onto the man's arm, throwing him off balance and sending the knife clattering away. Backup arrived moments later, but everyone knew the truth. If Titan had not acted, Marcus would not have survived. That night, Marcus held Titan's face in his hands and whispered words he had never spoken to anyone else. "You saved me, boy. I owe you everything. I will never let anyone hurt you. Not ever." It was a promise Marcus intended to keep until his dying breath. But promises, he would learn, could be shattered by forces beyond anyone's control. The night that destroyed Marcus Bennett's life began like any other. It was a cold February evening. Marcus and Titan had been assigned to assist with a raid on a warehouse in the industrial district outside Atlanta. Intelligence suggested the building was being used for weapons trafficking. The operation was supposed to be straightforward. It was anything but. From the moment Marcus stepped inside that warehouse, something felt wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. Titan sensed it too. The German shepherd moved with unusual caution, his nose twitching constantly, his body language screaming that danger lurked somewhere in the shadows. Marcus remembers fragments of what happened next. He remembers moving through stacks of wooden crates. He remembers Titan suddenly stopping, a deep growl vibrating through his body. He remembers the explosion of movement, a figure dropping from above, the blinding pain that erupted in his left shoulder. Someone had stabbed him. Marcus stumbled backward, gasping, his vision blurring from shock. He heard Titan barking frantically somewhere nearby, heard the dog's claws scraping against the concrete as he fought to reach his partner. Then came the gunshots. 1, 2, 3. Sharp cracks that echoed through the warehouse like thunder. A body collapsed beside Marcus. He reached out, trying to see who it was, but blood was smearing across his vision. His own blood. The attackers. He could not tell anymore. Then came the sirens, the flashlights, the officers flooding into the building with weapons drawn. Marcus tried to speak, tried to explain what had happened, but his voice came out as nothing more than a strained whisper drowned by the chaos. And then he heard the words that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Marcus Bennett shot Officer Daniels. He killed his partner." "No," Marcus wanted to scream. "No, that is not what happened. Someone else was here. Someone attacked me. Titan saw everything, but no one listened." When the dust settled, the story that emerged was devastating in its simplicity. According to the official report, Marcus Bennett had snapped during the raid. He had turned his weapon on fellow officer Kevin Daniels and shot him at close range. The ballistics matched Marcus's service weapon. His fingerprints were on the trigger. His blood was mingled with the victims at the scene. And perhaps most damning of all, when backup officers arrived, they found Titan standing over Officer Daniels' body, barking frantically at Marcus as the other officers pulled him away. To everyone watching, it looked like the loyal K-9 was accusing his own handler. The prosecution used that image relentlessly during the trial. They painted Marcus as a troubled officer who had finally cracked under pressure. They pointed to the scene in the warehouse, to Titan's apparent rejection, to the mountain of physical evidence that seemed to prove his guilt beyond any reasonable doubt. Marcus maintained his innocence from the very first moment. He told anyone who would listen that someone else had been in that warehouse, that he had been stabbed before the shooting started, that the real killer had escaped. But no one believed him. There were no security cameras, no witnesses except officers who arrived after everything was over. The investigation concluded within weeks, and the trial lasted less than 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning with their verdict. Guilty. The victim's family demanded the harshest punishment possible. They wanted Marcus to pay with his life for betraying the badge, for turning on one of his own. And the judge agreed. Marcus was sentenced to death by lethal injection. Throughout the entire ordeal, Marcus never cried. He never begged. He never showed fear. Not because he was guilty, but because he had already lost the only thing in this world he truly cared about. Titan. After Marcus's arrest, the German Shepherd had been taken away and reassigned to another, Handler. Marcus was not allowed to see him, not allowed to say goodbye, not allowed to explain. The dog who had been his entire world was ripped from his life without warning, and that, more than the death sentence, more than the years of isolation, more than the public humiliation, was what truly broke Marcus Bennett. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far in the story below. I read every single one. 5 years passed inside the concrete walls of death row. 5 years of isolation and silence. 5 years of replaying that night over and over, trying to fill in the gaps in his memory. Marcus aged in ways that went far beyond the physical. The vibrant officer who had commanded respect was now a hollow shell. His hair had gone gray. Deep lines etched his face. His eyes carried the distant look of someone who had spent too long staring into the abyss. But through it all, Marcus never stopped thinking about Titan. He dreamed about the German Shepherd constantly. Sometimes they were running through an open field. Other times, the dreams were nightmares. When his execution date was finally set, the prison chaplain came with a clipboard. "Marcus," the chaplain said softly, "as part of the execution protocol, you're entitled to one final request. Within reason, of course. Most inmates ask for a special meal, a visit from family, a meeting with a priest. Is there anything you want?" Marcus did not hesitate. "I want to see Titan." The chaplain blinked. Your dog?" "My partner," Marcus corrected him. "The German Shepherd I worked with for 14 years. I want to see him one more time before I die." The chaplain seemed at a loss for words. This was not the request he had been expecting. But something in Marcus's eyes, some desperate, unspoken plea, convinced him not to argue. "I'll see what I can do." Word spread through the prison like wildfire. Some laughed at the absurdity. Others found it strangely touching. The warden held a private meeting with the prison board. After hours of deliberation, the request was granted. A black SUV began the long drive from Charleston to Greystone Penitentiary. Inside, secured in a transport crate, was an old German Shepherd named Titan. The morning of the visit dawned cold and gray. Inside the prison, the tension was palpable. Marcus stood in the waiting room adjacent to the execution chamber, his wrists shackled, guards at every entrance. He had barely slept. Part of him feared Titan would not remember him, but another part clung to hope. The heavy steel door swung open, and Marcus's breath caught. A young officer entered, holding a leash, and at the other end walked Titan. The German Shepherd was older now, his movements slower, his fur marked with more silver, but his eyes were exactly the same. For a moment, everything else fell away. Then Titan stopped. His ears flattened. A low growl rumbled from his chest. Marcus felt his heart shatter. "Titan," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Boy, it's me. It's Marcus." But Titan did not run to him. The German Shepherd stood frozen in place, his lips pulling back to reveal teeth that had once brought down criminals twice his size. The growl intensified, echoing off the concrete walls, filling the room with a sound that made every guard reach instinctively for their weapons. The young officer holding the leash exchanged alarmed glances with the warden. "Sir, something's wrong. He's never acted like this before." The warden stepped forward cautiously. "Maybe the dog remembers what happened that night. Maybe he remembers who the real killer is." Marcus closed his eyes against the wave of grief that threatened to drown him. After everything he had endured, after all the years of hoping and praying, this was how it would end. His own partner, the only creature in this world who had ever truly loved him, could not even bear to look at him. But then something unexpected happened. Titan's growl shifted. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but Marcus knew this dog better than he knew himself. He recognized the change immediately. Titan was not growling at Marcus. He was growling at something on Marcus. The room fell into stunned silence as Titan began to move. The German shepherd's growl had not ceased, but something in his body language had shifted dramatically. His ears, previously pinned flat against his skull, now pointed forward in sharp alertness. His tail, which had been tucked low, stood rigid and horizontal. And his eyes, those ancient, intelligent eyes, were focused not on Marcus's face, but on a spot somewhere near his left shoulder. The young officer holding Titan's leash, a man named Officer Derek Palmer, who had been caring for the retired K-9 for the past 3 years, recognized the change immediately. He had seen this posture countless times before, on training exercises, during mock searches, even on a few real cases where Titan had been brought out of retirement to assist. This was not aggression. This was not fear. This was investigation. "Wait," Palmer said, his voice cutting through the tension. "Don't move. Nobody move." The warden frowned impatiently. "What's going on, officer?" "Titan's alerting to something," Palmer explained, his eyes fixed on the dog. "He's tracking a scent. Something on the inmate is triggering his training." Marcus stood perfectly still, barely breathing. He understood what was happening now, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt something stir in his chest that he had long given up on. Hope. Titan circled Marcus slowly, deliberately, sniffing the air around him with sharp, focused breaths. The retired K-9 moved behind Marcus, his nose hovering near the base of his neck, then down toward his left shoulder. Blade! Suddenly, Titan froze. His ears twitched. His breathing deepened. His entire body went rigid. Then he barked. Once. Sharp and urgent, like a gunshot in the confined space. Everyone in the room jumped. A guard near the door cursed under his breath. The warden took an involuntary step backward. Palmer knelt beside Titan, his face pale. "That's an alert bark," he said quietly. "He's found something." "Found what?" the warden demanded. What could he possibly find on a man in prison clothes? But Palmer was already moving. He approached Marcus carefully, his hands raised to show he meant no harm. "Sir, I need to check something. With your permission." Marcus nodded wordlessly. His heart was pounding so hard he could hear the blood rushing in his ears. Palmer lifted the back of Marcus's prison shirt, exposing the skin beneath. And what he saw made him stumble backward in shock. "Warden," Palmer said, his voice shaking, "you need to see this." The warden approached reluctantly, squinting at the spot Palmer indicated. There, hidden beneath the fabric of the orange jumpsuit, was a scar. Not a random mark or a prison injury, but a deliberate puncture wound, old but still visible, positioned exactly where Titan had been alerting. "What the hell is that?" the warden breathed. "That's not just a scar," Palmer said slowly. "That's a stab wound. Old, healed over, but deep. And it's exactly the kind of injury Titan was trained to identify on victims of violence." The room erupted in confused murmurs. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet as fragments of memory, pieces of that terrible night that had eluded him for 5 years, began to surface. The warehouse, the darkness, the figure dropping from above, the blinding pain in his shoulder before the gunshots ever started. Someone had stabbed him. Before Officer Daniels was killed, before the chaos erupted, someone had attacked Marcus from behind. And Titan remembered. "He's not alerting because he thinks I'm a threat," Marcus whispered, tears streaming down his face. "He's alerting because he knows I was a victim." Palmer stared at Marcus with a mixture of disbelief and dawning realization. "If that's true," he said slowly, "then everything we know about that night is wrong." The warden held up his hand. His face had gone pale. "Officer Palmer," he said, "are you telling me this dog identified evidence that the condemned man was attacked before the murder?" Palmer nodded. "Titan has never given a false alert, not once. If he's signaling this wound is connected to trauma, something is seriously wrong with the official story." Titan barked again, as if confirming Palmer's words. Then the German Shepherd did something that broke Marcus completely. He walked forward, pressed his warm forehead against Marcus's chest, and whined softly, a sound filled with years of confusion. Separation, and finally, recognition. Marcus sank to his knees, chains rattling, and wrapped his arms around the dog who had just given him something he had lost long ago. A chance at the truth. Think about this for a moment. Marcus spent 5 years on death row, convicted of a crime based on evidence that everyone believed was airtight. But a dog remembered what humans forgot. If you were in Marcus's shoes right now, feeling that hope surge after years of darkness, what would be going through your mind? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The moment Titan's bark echoed through that sterile room, something shifted inside Marcus's mind. A door sealed shut for 5 years suddenly cracked open. He closed his eyes, and the execution wing disappeared. The warehouse materialized with startling clarity. He could smell the rust and oil, feel the cold air, hear the rain hammering against the tin roof. Everything came rushing back, in fragments. Marcus remembered moving through the shadows with Titan at his side. The German Shepherd had been tense from the moment they entered the building, his nose twitching constantly, his body radiating an unease that Marcus had learned to trust over 14 years of partnership. Then Titan stopped. The dog planted himself directly in Marcus's path, refusing to move forward. A low growl rumbled from his chest, different from his usual warning sounds. This growl carried desperation, urgency, as if Titan was trying to communicate something his handler could not yet comprehend. Marcus remembered reaching for his radio, intending to call for backup. And then the world exploded. A figure dropped from the rafters above, moving so fast that Marcus barely had time to register what was happening. Strong hands grabbed his collar. A blade flashed in the dim light. Searing pain erupted in his left shoulder as the knife plunged deep into his flesh. Marcus gasped and stumbled, backward, blood already soaking through his uniform. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arm would not cooperate. The attacker was whispering something, words that seemed distorted and muffled, like a voice heard underwater. "Stay quiet, or the dog dies." Those words. Marcus remembered them now with horrifying clarity. The threat had been directed at Titan. Someone had used his partner as leverage to keep Marcus compliant. Titan was barking frantically somewhere in the chaos, his claws scraping against concrete as he fought to reach Marcus. There were other sounds, too. Footsteps, shouting, the unmistakable crack of gunfire. 1 shot, 2 shots, 3. A body collapsed beside Marcus. He reached out blindly, trying to see through the blood smearing across his vision, trying to understand what was happening. But then more footsteps thundered toward them, and Marcus heard voices, voices that did not belong to his attackers. Backup had arrived. And in that moment of chaos, Marcus saw something that had been erased from his memory until now. A figure standing in the far corner of the warehouse, watching silently while the other officers focused on the fallen body and the bleeding canine handler. The figure slipped out through a back exit just as the first flashlights swept across the scene. Someone else had been there, someone who had witnessed everything, someone who had escaped before anyone thought to look. Marcus snapped back to the present, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The execution chamber came back into focus around him. The concrete walls, the fluorescent lights, the stunned faces of the guards and officials. "Someone else was there that night," Marcus said, his voice barely above a whisper. Someone stabbed me before the shooting started. Someone threatened to kill Titan if I made a sound. And someone escaped before backup arrived. Officer Palmer exchanged a troubled glance with the warden. If that's true, Palmer said carefully, then the officer who died wasn't shot by you. Titan barked once, sharp and definitive, as if confirming every word. The warden ran a hand over his face, clearly wrestling with the implications of what he was hearing. This is unprecedented. A K-9's testimony isn't admissible evidence. A 5-year-old memory triggered by a scar isn't proof of anything. Maybe not in a courtroom, Palmer replied firmly. But Titan has never given a false alert. His service record is perfect. If he's saying there's more to this story, then there's more to this story. Before the warden could respond, Titan moved again. This time, the retired German Shepherd circled around and began sniffing the air in a different direction. His body language shifted from investigation to something sharper, more urgent. His ears pinned forward, his hackles raised slightly, and another growl rumbled from his chest. But this growl was not directed at Marcus. Titan was staring at someone else in the room. One of the guards standing near the back wall shifted uncomfortably under the dog's intense gaze. He was a tall man in his 40s with a weathered face and nervous eyes. A man named Officer Raymond Briggs. "Why is he looking at me like that?" Briggs demanded, his voice cracking slightly. "Call off your dog." Palmer studied Titan's posture with growing alarm. "I don't think he's wrong," he said quietly. "Titan's alerting to something. Your scent is triggering him." Briggs laughed, but the sound was hollow and forced. "That's ridiculous. I wasn't anywhere near that warehouse 5 years ago. The dog is old. He's confused." But Titan was not confused. The German Shepherd took a deliberate step forward, his growl intensifying. His gaze locked onto Briggs with the laser focus of a predator who had finally found his prey. And Marcus, watching this unfold with a racing heart, suddenly understood. Titan was not just identifying the wound on his body. He was identifying the person responsible for it. The truth had finally arrived. Officer Raymond Briggs stood frozen against the wall, sweat beading on his forehead, his eyes darting between Titan and the exit. The retired German Shepherd had not moved an inch, his body coiled with tension, his growl a constant menacing vibration that filled the room. "Get that dog away from me," Briggs snapped, his voice rising in pitch. "This is insane. You're going to trust some senile animal over a decorated officer?" Officer Palmer stepped forward, placing himself between Briggs and the door. "Titan doesn't alert to uniforms or badges. He alerts to scent. And right now, he's telling us that your scent is connected to the trauma Marcus experienced 5 years ago." The warden raised his hand, commanding silence. "Briggs, I'm going to ask you once, and only once. Is there something you want to tell us?" Briggs' jaw tightened. For a long moment, the only sound in the room was Titan's low, persistent growling. Then something cracked behind Briggs's eyes. Something that had been holding together for 5 long years finally giving way. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Briggs said, his voice trembling. "None of you do." Marcus felt his blood run cold. "What does that mean?" Briggs laughed bitterly. "It means that warehouse wasn't just a random raid. It was a cleanup operation. An off-the-books job that some people high up in the department wanted kept quiet." The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Palmer held Titan's leash tight, his knuckles white with tension. "Explain. Now." Briggs slumped against the wall, the fight draining out of him. The warehouse was being used as a staging ground for evidence tampering. Weapons that should have been destroyed, drugs that were supposed to be locked up, case files that needed to disappear. A few of us were running it, under the radar. The department brass knew, but looked the other way, because it made their statistics look good. Marcus felt sick. And Officer Daniels, the man I supposedly murdered? Briggs flinched at the name. Daniels found out. He threatened to expose everything. He was going to bring the whole operation crashing down. He looked at Marcus with hollow eyes. You were never supposed to be there that night. Your assignment was a mistake, a scheduling error. But when you showed up with that dog, everything went sideways. The pieces were finally falling into place. Marcus's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. You stabbed me. I was trying to subdue you, Briggs said desperately. You weren't supposed to be part of this. I thought if I could incapacitate you, we could clean up the scene before backup arrived. But then Daniel started yelling, threatening to radio for help, and someone panicked. Someone? Briggs' eyes flickered toward the warden, then away. I wasn't the one who pulled the trigger. That was someone else. Someone who had more to lose than the rest of us. Titan suddenly jerked toward the far corner of the room, his bark sharp and furious. Every head turned to follow his gaze. Standing near the observation window, his face carefully neutral, but his hands trembling at his sides, was Lieutenant Colonel Victor Stanton. The prison's second-in-command and, Marcus suddenly remembered, a transfer from the same district where the warehouse incident occurred. Stanton had been at that precinct 5 years ago. Stanton had been one of the officers who pushed hardest for Marcus's conviction. Stanton had spent years climbing the ranks, protected by colleagues who shared his secrets. And now, Titan was pointing directly at him. That's enough, Stanton said, his voice deceptively calm. This circus has gone on long enough. Remove the dog and prepare the inmate for his execution. Sir, Palmer said slowly, Titan just gave a positive identification. You're connected to this. I said remove the dog. But Titan was not about to be silenced. The German shepherd lunged against his leash, barking with a fury that Marcus had rarely seen in all their years together. This was not just an alert. This was an accusation. Stanton's composure finally shattered. His hand moved toward the weapon at his hip, and in that instant, the room exploded into chaos. Guards shouted warnings. Palmer yanked Titan backward. Marcus threw himself to the floor, chains rattling. But Titan was faster than all of them. The elderly German shepherd, powered by 14 years of training and 5 years of waiting for this moment, broke free from Palmer's grip and launched himself at Stanton with a roar that shook the foundations of the room. His jaws clamped down on Stanton's wrist just as the man's fingers closed around his weapon, knocking the gun to the floor with a metallic clatter. Guards swarmed forward, tackling Stanton to the ground. The lieutenant colonel screamed curses and denials, but his mask had finally fallen. Titan stood over him, teeth bared, eyes burning with the righteous fury of a witness who had waited years to deliver his testimony. And Marcus, still kneeling on the cold concrete floor, watched the man who had destroyed his life being hauled away in chains. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part hit you the hardest in the story, and share your thoughts in the comments. The warden stood in the center of the room, his face ashen. Around him, officers were securing Briggs and arranging transport for Stanton. The chaos was beginning to settle into something resembling order, but the implications of what had just occurred hung heavy in the air. Get me the state attorney general's office, the warden said quietly to one of his aides, and contact the governor. We have a situation that requires immediate attention. He turned to face Marcus, who was still kneeling on the floor with Titan pressed against his side. The German shepherd had not left his partner since the confrontation ended, his warm body a constant, reassuring presence. Mr. Bennett, the warden said formally, based on what has occurred here today, I am immediately suspending all execution proceedings pending a full investigation. Marcus looked up, his eyes red with tears he had been holding back for years. Does that mean? The warden nodded slowly. "It means you are no longer a condemned man. It means that tomorrow, when the sun rises, you will still be alive. And it means that for the first time in 5 years, justice might actually have a chance to prevail." The sun was rising over the eastern horizon when Marcus Bennett walked out of Greystone Penitentiary for the first time in 5 years. Not through the back gate, where they transported bodies. Not in a hearse, as he had expected to leave just hours ago. Through the front entrance reserved for the living, for those who had earned the right to breathe free air once more. The cold morning wind hit his face, and Marcus closed his eyes, letting the sensation wash over him. It carried the scent of pine trees from the nearby forest, the distant hum of traffic on the highway, and something else, something familiar and precious. Titan. The old German shepherd walked beside him, his steps slower than they used to be, his joints stiff with age, but his spirit utterly unbroken. Every few paces, Titan would lean slightly against Marcus's leg, as if reassuring himself that this was real, that they were finally together again, that the nightmare was truly over. A black sedan with government plates waited at the curb. A woman in a sharp suit stepped out, her expression professional but not unkind. "Mr. Bennett, I'm Deputy Attorney General Sarah Mitchell. I've been assigned to oversee your case personally." Marcus nodded, but his hand never left Titan's head. "What happens now?" "Now we begin the process of overturning your conviction," Mitchell replied. "Lieutenant Colonel Stanton and Officer Briggs are both in custody and have begun cooperating with investigators. Their testimony, combined with the evidence Titan provided, is more than enough to prove that you were framed." "How long will it take?" Mitchell hesitated. "The legal process can be slow, but given the circumstances, the governor has already indicated his willingness to expedite. We're looking at weeks, possibly days, before your name is officially cleared." Marcus absorbed this information in silence. After 5 years of darkness, the light at the end of the tunnel felt almost blinding. "There's something else," Mitchell continued. "The state is prepared to offer you compensation for your wrongful imprisonment, a formal apology, and restoration of your pension and benefits. It won't undo what happened, but it's a start." Marcus shook his head slowly. "I don't need their money. I don't need their apology. All I need is right here." He knelt down beside Titan, wrapping his arms around the dog who had saved his life not once, but twice. Titan pressed his forehead against Marcus's chest and released a soft whine. The same sound he used to make after particularly difficult missions, when they were finally safe and together. "You never forgot, did you, boy?" Marcus whispered. "All those years, all that time apart, and you never forgot the truth." Titan's tail tapped softly against the ground. It was not the excited wagging of a young dog greeting his owner. It was something deeper, something more profound. It was the quiet acknowledgement of a bond that had survived separation, injustice, and the shadow of death itself. Mitchell watched the scene with an expression that suggested she was fighting back tears of her own. "Mr. Bennett, where would you like us to take you?" Marcus stood slowly, his hand still resting on Titan's head. "Home," he said simply. "Wherever that ends up being. As long as he's with me, it'll be home." A crowd of reporters had gathered behind the barricades at the prison entrance, cameras flashing, microphones extended. They had come expecting to cover the execution of a condemned killer. Instead, they were witnessing something far more extraordinary, the resurrection of an innocent man. Marcus approached the microphones with Titan at his side. "My name is Marcus Bennett," he began. "For 5 years you were told I murdered my partner. You were told I betrayed my badge. You were told I was a monster." He looked down at Titan. "But you were never told the truth. The truth was buried by corruption. and the only witness who remembered wasn't human. Titan nudged Marcus's hand, and Marcus smiled through his tears. This dog saved my life twice. Once in a warehouse, when he stood between me and an attacker. And again today, when he walked into a room full of people who had given up on me and showed them what they had refused to see. He remembered what I couldn't. He carried the truth when I had lost all hope, and because of him, I'm standing here alive. One of the reporters called out, "What will you do now, Mr. Bennett?" Marcus looked at the horizon, where the sun was climbing higher into a sky that seemed impossibly blue. "I'm going to take my partner home. I'm going to sit with him on a porch somewhere quiet, where we can watch the birds and feel the wind and remember what it means to be free. And I'm going to spend every day I have left making sure he knows how much he means to me." Titan barked once, loud and clear, as if announcing to the world that their mission was finally complete. As Marcus walked toward the waiting sedan, a nurse from the prison infirmary rushed out carrying a small envelope. "Mr. Bennett, this was found among your belongings when you were first incarcerated. It got lost in storage, but I thought you might want it back." Marcus opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a photograph, faded and worn around the edges, of a younger version of himself standing beside a younger version of Titan. It was taken on their very first day as partners, 14 years ago. They both looked so full of hope, so ready to take on the world together. On the back of the photograph, in Marcus's own handwriting, were 4 words he had written long before the nightmare began. "Where you go, I go." Marcus pressed the photograph against his chest and closed his eyes. It had never been just a promise. It had been a prophecy. Through separation, through injustice, through 5 years of hell, their bond had endured. And now, finally, they were going home together. The car pulled away from Greystone Penitentiary, carrying Marcus and Titan toward whatever future awaited them. Behind them, the prison walls grew smaller and smaller, until they were nothing more than a distant memory on the horizon. Marcus's last wish before execution had not been a farewell. It had been the beginning of everything he had been denied. A new life, a new chance, a story rewritten by the loyalty of a dog who never forgot. And that, friends, is where our story ends. But the lessons it carries will stay with us forever. This story teaches us that truth can be delayed, but it can never be destroyed. No matter how dark life becomes, no matter how deeply injustice buries someone, honesty, loyalty, and courage will always rise again. Marcus's innocence survived because one loyal friend refused to forget. Titan reminds us that integrity leaves traces through actions, through memories, through the bonds we forge with those who stand by us. Corruption may win temporarily, but justice prevails when even one brave voice refuses to stay silent. And sometimes that voice does not belong to a human. Sometimes it belongs to a faithful companion who remembered the truth when everyone else chose to look away. Thank you so much for watching this incredible story all the way through. Stories like this remind us why loyalty matters, why truth matters, and why we should never give up on the people and animals we love. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to RealTales. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories like this one to people all around the world. And I would love to hear from you. What part of Marcus and Titan's story moved you the most? What lessons are you taking away from their journey? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and your reflections make this community so special. Until next time, remember that loyalty is the most powerful force in the universe. And sometimes, the most important witness is the one who speaks without words. This has been RealTales. Thank you for being part of our family.